Hey everyone, I'm MattTGM, and welcome back to another video in the Devil May Cry boss ranking series. The support on the last video was insane, thank you all so much, and I hope this is a worthy successor. I guess you can also consider this the MattTGM Halloween special for 2022. Not the Halloween special I was hoping to get made, but hey, at least this commenter thinks it's appropriate, and Devil May Cry does kinda stick with the horror theme. I want to give a quick apology for the quality of the last video. I feel I went a bit too quickly and skimmed over the finer details of some of the bosses, not giving them their true due diligence. I mainly did that in an attempt to avoid excessive video length because that's been a bit of a problem as of late. Not everyone has time to sit there and watch a video essay on why the Reaper isn't actually very good as a boss because it's a standard enemy with a health bar. Hopefully, this video is a bit more balanced between speed and in-depthness, but there's only one way to find out. Let's begin. Number 40, Bolverk. Hey, check it out, Devil May Cry 2 is still going strong. Well done guys, you outlived the bottom third. We now come to Bolverk, one of the only decent bosses in the game. He's a night type fight. That's good, with some wolves that he uses to gank you. That's not so good. Did they learn nothing from the Capra demon? A whole decade later. Admittedly, his helpers die pretty easily to your attacks if you can actually hit them with the lock-on, so they don't ruin the fight. And then it's just you and Bolverk, who comes at you with pretty basic sword attacks. Nothing extraordinary, though that's a compliment as far as this game is concerned. This is also one of the only bosses with some sort of backstory. Apparently, Bolverk was a rival to Sparta during the Dark Knight's heyday. So he's yet another mess left over from Sparta that Dante has to clean up. Oh, what a pain. To be honest, there's not too much I can say about this man. He's just a tolerable night-type fight in a less than tolerable game. However, considering how much I've ripped into every other Devil May Cry 2 boss up to this point, that's ultimately a good thing. In a better Devil May Cry game, Bolverk could have been a pretty good fight. Number 39, Gigapede. So, what the hell is this thing supposed to be? This demon just kinda comes out of nowhere, flying out of some sort of hole in the wall while you're exploring the tower. Is it an infestation? Are there more of these things? I hope not, because this fight really isn't good enough to warrant repeating. Except that's exactly what Devil May Cry 3 makes you do in the boss rush level. Thanks, Itsuno. This guy flies from hole to hole in the wall while shooting you with pink or blue balls. Oh, how scandalous. You can actually smack the pink balls back at him for large amounts of damage, kinda like a Cuphead parry mechanic on steroids, but I absolutely suck at the timing. However, that is a skill issue on my end, so I can't go and criticize the attack too much, just need to get good as it were. The difficulty and fun factor of this boss really depends on how consistently you can get on top of him. Take that out of context. The platforms around the arena are what make that possible, but with a fixed camera and with how much this boss likes to move and spin around in the air, it's not easy by any means. The fight can be frustrating if you can't stay on him, because it can drag out unnecessarily beyond the point of fun. But if you have air hike, the boss is much more enjoyable because you can just jump right back on straight away almost. Because of this, the rematch with this guy in the boss rush level is actually a lot more enjoyable than the initial encounter. It's hardly a Margit Morgott situation, but hey, gotta give Gigapede some kind of credit. I know nobody else will.
Parasite. Uh-oh. I think he hurt me. And he's angry!
Number 38. Nidhogg. Back at Devil May Cry 5, and we're going from house plant to plant pest with Nidhogg, the Qlipoth parasite. And like most parasites, he's quite the pain in the ass. Nidhogg is this big jello monster with knives that you need to kill in order to make him die, as you do. But he summons these other plant tentacle monster things to attack you with sweeps and charges that carry a lot of destructive force, all while he attacks with downward slashes and kamikaze attacks. None of this is anything unheard of. V has a double jump by default, so you can avoid most attacks that way as long as Griffin isn't dead, and the charges have ample wind up so you can get out of the way in advance. Once you've destroyed all of the snake plant things, Nidhogg will be stunned for a little while, and that's your main window to summon Nightmare, Devil Trigger up your servants, and just go to town on his health bar. The annoying parts of the fight mainly come in the form of Nidhogg's substantial health bar, meaning you'll need to stun him more than once to kill him in a reasonable time period, and the fact that if you can't effectively dominate the fight and destroy the snakes consistently, Nidhogg could spend several minutes hiding away unable to be hit, hopping in and out more than a jack-in-the-box. It's not the most fun battle, especially with V's combat style making the fight take even longer than it should have to, but the fact that this is in Devil May Cry 5, the best game in the franchise, makes it more worthwhile by default, and the character moments and personality present in the fight from V, his familiars, and Nidhogg itself add points to the entertainment value, so I'll give it a bit of credit. Number 37, Nightmare from Devil May Cry 1. It should be indicative of the average Devil May Cry 1 boss quality that their lowest ranking boss is this high up on the list, and for the first game in the series, and a game that's so old, that's an impressive feat. Nightmare is a fairly unique fight. It's a big blob boss that's invulnerable to attack until you light up these sigils around the arena. That lets you smack this glass orb to damage the health bar. Simple enough. His main gimmick is trapping you in another dimension where he summons a boss that you've already beaten in the game to fight you. Phantom, Griffin, even Nello Angelo in the third fight, and don't worry, we'll cover all those bosses eventually. Beating this sub-boss does a lot of damage to Nightmare, and it lets you escape, but if you're really struggling, you can manage to avoid the attack altogether, and he won't summon the same boss twice in one fight. Besides that, there's really not too much more to say about Nightmare. Despite his differing mechanics and appearance, he's a fairly simple boss. Like all Devil May Cry 1 bosses except the last one, you end up fighting Nightmare 3 times throughout the game, with each encounter getting harder. In the last fight you have with him, Trish decides to join the party in the second phase and shoot you in the butt with lightning periodically, encouraging you to dominate this boss as quickly as possible before you get overwhelmed. If you have Devil Trigger saved up, that will not be a hard task. I've lost to this final phase twice and beaten it twice, and Trish honestly doesn't affect the battle too much from what I've experienced. She just fires a couple of weak projectiles that you have to dodge, and it's not like you haven't been dodging the entire battle. You don't tend to stand still in this fight. Nightmare may not be my favourite fight by any means, but it's still a very memorable battle with story significance, and it's unlike anything else you face at this point in the franchise. Gotta give credit where credit is due. Number 36, Furiataurus. In all honesty, the thing that holds this guy back for the most part is the fact that he's in Devil May Cry 2. If he was in a good Devil May Cry game, like literally any other one in the franchise, he'd probably be a top 30 boss. Why is that? Well, you know everything I said about the despair embodied in the last video? It applies here as well. His attacks have decent tells, his damage is enough to make the fight engaging while not being bullshit, his design is pretty cool, he provides a good visual spectacle with his variety of attacks that also give a good level of challenge, and his entrance is snappy on behalf of Arius. See what I did there? Huh? If you don't put in the effort to beat him, this guy is perfectly capable of smacking you around. He's not a snooze fest like Nocturne. The challenge is engaging though, not bullshit like Trismagia or Argosax the Chaos. I found a good way to stay safe from his damage was to stay in the air with air hike as much as possible, letting you avoid some of his AoE attacks and especially his charge, because the Devil May Cry 2 dodge mechanic really isn't enough to save you from that unless he's miles away from you at the start. Furiataurus takes the crown as the best boss in his own game, and he's good enough to get somewhat near the top half of this list. When compared to the entire franchise's boss roster, that is a pretty impressive feat. And with that, Devil May Cry 2 is done in the boss rankings. While the series may have started off with top 9 worst bosses in Devil May Cry 2 and also Leviathan Insights is here, they held their place in these videos for longer than I expected honestly. There's glimpses of potential in there, and overall it goes out on a moderate high point with Furiataurus, though we are still in the bottom half of the list. But even so, thank you Devil May Cry 2, you sucked. Number 35, Gilgamesh.
You never cease to amuse me, mongrel.
What? What are you doing, MattTGM? The king of the world at only number 35 on the list? Am I seeking death for treasonous slander? No, not really. In fact, I bet you guys weren't expecting to see this Goliath this late on the list. No, not that Goliath. He's later down. He's much later down. But from what I've heard, not many people like Gilgamesh. Personally, I really don't mind him, hence why he made it this far on the list, even if he is a waste of a cool name. I gotta give this guy credit for his introduction if nothing else. When I first saw him in that cutscene after V's mission, I was genuinely intimidated. And when you take him on as Nero, the fight itself is about what you'd expect from a giant whatever the fuck this is. Gilgamesh mainly attacks by either firing lightning balls, summoning black spikes out of his back to poke you, flopping on you like a fat silverfish, or summoning these flying Beyblades. Not an extreme amount of variety, but there's no bullshit attacks in there, so I can't take too many points away from that, especially compared to what we've had so far. How you beat him is that you shoot the weak points on Gilgamesh's legs, then grapple them to launch yourself way up above him onto his back. When you're on him, there's a big red glowing orb that is a pretty obvious weak point, so you gotta smack it until he's dead. Now where have we seen that before? So why does this guy make it so far down on the list for such a simple fight? Well, it's like Nidhogg to an extent. Devil May Cry 5 is just so damn fun that even mediocre bosses like the Furiataurus are elevated up by being in that game. I personally love dancing around his attacks as Nero, maximizing my airtime with taunts, bullets, even the triple jump, so I can get in as many hits as possible without having to go back to the ground. If you really want to go all out, equip a couple of Gerberas as well. There are definitely a lot of ways to stay up there and lay punishment down on this giant walking insect, and I just find that a decently enjoyable battle with alright design, hence why I placed it here on the list. Number 34, the Hunter Demon. DMC Devil May Cry coming back into the rankings with an actually half-decent boss. Who would have thought? Sure, this big gorilla monkey in his face is nothing special, but he at least puts up a fight and doesn't do anything offensively wrong. He's the opening boss of the game, your tutorial, and he's built up throughout the first level, all the way from the opening cutscene. Adding on to that is the fact that he constantly stalks you, and even acts as an environmental hazard throughout that first stage, building up to your eventual confrontation, and it is a worthwhile battle. His visual design is rather impressive, at least for this game's standard. It looks like they tried to make him intimidating, rather than just disgusting. He's a more than tolerable fight to teach players the mechanics of DMC Devil May Cry, so there's not really much I can fault him on. He's got a big dagger that comes at you with swipes or leaping gun with stabs, and he can even blanket the arena in dark fog and send his hook spinning at you like a Beyblade. His attacks aren't really anything special, and his difficulty isn't too taxing, especially with the overly generous stagger opportunities he presents, but he's a decent enough learning experience and you can style on this man fairly easily, which is always enjoyable. The Hunter Demon is the beginning of a new category of bosses for this ranking, those that are pretty alright and don't do anything wrong, but are just outmatched by higher entries on the list. That being said, he's still a fun opener to the game. Well done, DMC. Number 33, The Savior. Check it out, amigos, we've now got a boss from every game in the franchise on the list. Is the fact that Devil May Cry 4 only appeared now indicative of the overall boss quality? Possibly, but let's examine this guy more in depth first. I bet many of you weren't expecting this boss to be so far down the list. From what I can tell, it's fairly disliked in the community. Honestly, I wasn't expecting it this high either, but I've always had a trend for being quirky with my rankings. Now, this thing may not be the most engaging battle on the list, but the sheer spectacle and scale of the fight gobsmacked me the first time I fought it, and it still makes me feel excitement even today. I mean, bosses in God of War 3 like Poseidon and Kronos are some of my favourites ever, and this giant enemy brings a similar sense of spectacle, which gets me hyped every time. Admittedly, it's nowhere near as good as Poseidon or Kronos, but I still like it. After Sanctus absorbs Nero, Kyrie, and the Devil Sword Sparta, this giant statue comes to life and starts raising hell. Literally. Naturally, Dante ain't okay with that, so we're gonna fight it. We've seen big statue fights in the series before, so how will we take on this one? By hitting the weak points until it dies. How revolutionary. However, I find it a pretty good time. You run around several floating platforms that surround the savior, and that gives you windows to attack several blue orbs throughout the body, which do damage to the boss. You do this to orbs on his arms, legs, head, chest, and back. You can use guns for this if you feel like taking forever, but the true way to do it is using your Mato with Dante and the Dark Slayer style. The Judgment Cut ability shreds these orbs to pieces, but the savior ain't gonna take this lying down. Or floating, I suppose. The statue attacks you with various crushing attacks, leg swings, projectiles, and eventually it uses a massive fucking laser beam that is easy to avoid, but incredibly deadly if you don't. Plus, there's a few standard enemies lying around the arena, but the Savior's attacks will kill them too, so they are really more bystanders. After enough of the orb breaking, you end up having to attack one primary orb on his chest, which is when his health bar is revealed. This is where the fight can suffer a little. This part does take a while, especially as you can normally only hit it with ranged attacks. It's best to jump back and forth from this one middle platform, and hope he does the one attack where he floats up headfirst very close to you, letting you get a decent amount of hits in, ending the fight as quickly as possible. On my first try, this took about 4 to 6 times on normal mode, and then I was able to kill him. Overall, the fight is nothing special from a mechanical perspective, but the sheer spectacle from it gets me excited enough to gloss over its faults enough to land it here. Remember, this is just my personal opinion. Number 32, Phantom. Wait a minute, you look kinda familiar. For my thoughts on the original Phantom boss from Devil May Cry 1, wait till he pops up a lot later in the list. Oh. Well, at least here is a fight of good quality. This fight carries on, or I guess starts, the tradition of Devil May Cry 1 bosses appearing multiple times throughout the game. Sadly, Phantom doesn't bring too many new evolutions to the table, but for a starter boss, I think that's fine. It's more about your evolution than his. The first time you fight this guy is the very first boss fight in the game, and it's quite the introduction to the game's boss fights. From small, weak demons to a giant flaming spider in a church, it's a big leap in challenge and spectacle, but Dante doesn't so much as blink, and neither should you. The key is to mount him and wail on his weak spot before ducking out while he counters, although I suck at this. He'll attack from the front with easily dodged claw swipes and bites, but be careful of the lava he can make erupt from the floor. That's his deadliest attack by far. The second fight is when he attacks you from behind in a hallway. You're meant to run away here, dodging his fire blast as you do and ducking out the door, but the true devil hunters among us can run to the end of the hallway, turn around, devil trigger, and give Phantom the business for a second time. I highly recommend doing this, seeing as it's the best red orb farming method in the early game, and it's very satisfying seeing this coward running away again. The third fight is much the same as the first, but in a larger arena, and now you're a bit more experienced and a lot more powerful. Honestly, half the difficulty comes from getting the camera to cooperate with you. Phantom is a strong first boss for the franchise, hence its high placement, and it stands the test of time over 20 years later. Well done to you, sir. Number 31, Jester. So, one of the additions in the Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition was this Joker wannabe popping up in 3 different boss fights throughout the game. What a dick, am I right? Gimmick infringement on Devil May Cry 1. At least he isn't that bad of a fight. For context, Jester is Arkham, but cosplaying, so he's trying to slow you down on your journey. This kinda means the final Jester fight can't be canon, but whatever, it's from a special edition anyway, none of it matters. Basically, he starts off by ultra instincting every attack you throw at him with melee, so you take a page from Devil May Cry 2 and shoot to kill, except he dodges that too. Is this the end? Has Dante met his match? Will we be forced to watch, helpless, as Arkham mocks our pathetic attempts to even try to damage him? Oh wait, no, he's tired now. Never mind. Yeah, it turns out Arkham skipped cardio, so he tires out quickly and then you can smack him with melee. Well deserved. After that, he'll teleport to the middle of the arena and summon a shield around him, and then summon one of 3 different energy ball attacks to hit you with, all while saying creepy reused voice lines throughout the process. Ugh, no man. In addition to the 2 later fights you have with him is a big ball that he rides on in the second half of the fight. The ball spits stuff at you, blows up with time, and it elevates Jester out of the range of your basic sword attacks, meaning you have to attack him with air moves, and there aren't too many of those in Devil May Cry 3 unless you roll with Swordmaster. Jester is a pretty average fight if I'm honest, but the humour and character this guy brings to the table, even if he is a creepy bitch, elevates his fight above the other bosses so far on the list. Who would have thought that Arkham is a better fight when he's dressing up as a creepy clown, and not when he's wielding the power of a demonic knight? What a fucking loser. But hey, at least we never have to deal with him ever again, because we're officially done with the bottom half of this ranking series. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I hope you did enjoy it. Apologies for breaking my lined up schedule, but life hits hard sometimes, and these views are a pretty good indicator of what you guys want to see anyway. I hope to get at least one more video made and ready to upload, and then I'll probably go on a little bit of a hiatus. Probably 2 weeks before I focus on making more videos, especially for the month of December. Why am I taking a break, you might ask? Well... Don't worry though, I'll be back, and with a ton of new content to follow. So once again, thank you all for watching, happy Halloween, and I'll see you all next time.